I grew up in one of the slums here in Metro Manila where there's a lot of drug trafficking and prostitution. Children as early as 11 years old are already trafficking drugs so that they can provide for their families. Girls as early as 15, 16 are already working in the bars as prostitutes so that they can earn for their families.
Today we're joined by Sheba Tolentino, founder of Made in Hope, a community in Metro Manila transforming the lives of women who are survivors of sex trafficking and their children. Drawing from her own experience of poverty and trauma as a child, Michelle has spent 14 years creating spaces where the vulnerable are heard, empowered, and restored. Michelle Sheba Tolentino, I know your middle name now.
Yes.
Are you impressed that
I am
remembered?
so impressed.
How did you get your middle name, Sheba?
So my
Michelle.
aunt was the first Christian in her family.
Yeah.
Met a missionary in the local church in our area, and she became a Christian.
Okay.
And she loved the book of Proverbs.
Okay.
And she realized that it was written by King Solomon.
Yeah.
And so she studied King Solomon and met the Queen of Sheba in one
Okay.
of the Old
One of the
Testament
stories,
books. Yes. And so my aunt said, "Oh, that's a smart queen
Yeah.
who tested the wisdom of Solomon.
Yeah.
And I want my oldest niece to be named after
Uh,
the Queen of Sheba." And so that's
the seeker of
the
wisdom.
story. Yes.
a leader, a woman in leadership who sought wisdom.
Yeah. So I was thankful for my aunt, but
Yeah.
it's named after a pagan queen.
Yeah, but she was a seeker of wisdom and she was a leader. But yeah, and she knew where to go to find godly wisdom.
Yes,
So yeah.
yes.
So Michelle, I think we first met through the Global Children's
Yes.
Forum, which is a network of practitioners around the world who serve children. So you're very active in the Global Children's Forum, and maybe we'll come back to that. You're also co-leading an issue network of a movement called the Lausanne movement. Tell us a little bit about that issue network.
Yeah, so the Lausanne movement is about connecting influencers in global missions. So one of the issue networks that is part of the Lausanne movement is called the Children at Risk Issue Network. So this was started in 2010 officially, and we are talking about what is the role of children in global missions. So if we will backtrack the theology of the state of evangelical theology about children,
Okay.
during the 1970s, the global church, particularly the evangelical church, we do not mention children in any of our missional strategies. There's no mention of children. It was only in Manila gathering of the Lausanne movement in 1989 that was first they recognized that, oh, children are important. But then it was children are talked about as targets in missions.
Okay.
But it's only in 2010 that the global church recognized that children should be taken seriously and that they are part of the mission of God and that they are part of the mission force, that they can be co-laborers
They can be
in the
partners
mission
in
of
mission.
God. Yes.
And the focus, your particular focus within that context is vulnerable children.
Yes,
especially
vulnerable
vulnerable
children.
children,
Yeah.
children at risk.
Children at risk, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it could be argued that every child is vulnerable, is at risk. But what is the Children at Risk Issue Network of the Lausanne movement especially focus on?
Yeah. So as you said, we're focusing on the vulnerable children in the world. So when we say children at risk, these are children, and with the definition of children, these are 18 below of age, and they are exposed in different kinds of risk, physical risk. Some of them are living in areas that are experiencing extreme poverty, areas where there are wars, areas where there are a lot of exploitation that's happening on children, like child labor, sex trafficking among children. So these are the kind of children that we want to serve, and we want voices to be amplified so that the global church can hear their voices and where we are and where they are.
So children in extreme circumstances who are being exploited or in danger of being exploited. And you have been working in that area for
9 years.
Okay.
So this is my 9th year, and Next year will be my 10th year, and that will be the end of my service to this role as the
To the
catalyst.
issue
Yeah, to the
network
issue
within
network.
Lausanne.
Mhm.
Yeah. But it won't be the end of your service to
No,
children at risk.
definitely not.
Okay. And how long have you been working with vulnerable children?
I started with this as a ministry in 2011.
Okay.
Yes, so for 14 years now, this is what I breathe, I live.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And you established an organization
Yes, yeah.
to realize your vision. Tell us about that
Yes.
organization.
In 2011, when I was coming back here to the Philippines, I thought I'm coming back to the work that I'm doing in theater as part of the arts marketing. That's what I used to do. And yeah, God totally changed the direction of my life through what I felt a calling from Him. I remember in the last year of my seminary years in Moody Bible Institute, I had a class on the theology of missions class, and the professor asked us to write a paper entitled the Cross Bearing Paper.
Cross bearing, carrying your cross.
Yes,
Okay.
carrying your cross, based out of Luke 14, Jesus' invitation
Mhm.
on what it means to carry your cross and follow him. So the professor were asking us, what are the crosses that you think you are asked to bear in relation to your relationship with God, with
Mm.
Jesus, like Jesus' invitation to carry your cross? And so then I was writing about what's heavy on my heart is this issue of exploited women and children. And so I kept that in my heart. And when I was coming back to the Philippines, that's the what's really burning
Mm.
inside of me. But of course, I was disobedient and doesn't really want to respond to the call. But I felt like I not respond to it. And so I started connecting with
Why were
local
you
ministries
hesitant to respond?
because of, I think, my own personal story.
Okay.
If I can share my story,
Yeah.
I was a child at risk when I was growing up. I grew up in one of the slums here in Metro Manila where
Mm.
there's a lot of drug trafficking and prostitution. Children as early as 11 years old are already trafficking drugs so that they can
Mm.
provide for their families.
Mm.
Girls as early as 15, 16 are already working in the bars as prostitutes so that they can earn for their families.
To survive.
Yes, to survive because of poverty. So that is the push of poverty with vulnerable children, vulnerable communities. And so my story, I wasn't exploited as a child, but as a child, I experienced different abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse. And that really had an impact in
Mm.
my life.
Mm.
So I know,
Course.
yeah. And aside from that, we were living in poverty. I remember we have to share one egg. I have two brothers. I have my mom and my dad. And so that we just have to share one egg for dinner. And then I remember when my little brother was born, my mother doesn't have money to buy milk. So we have to use the when you cook rice, there's water there. So the water from the rice was fed to my youngest brother. So
Mm.
it was a difficult childhood.
Mm.
And on top of that, because of the drug addiction in the community, my father became a drug addict. And so that's the challenge that we have as children is to live in that community where children are not safe from any kind of this exploitation.
You still remember what it was like as a child to go to bed hungry
Oh,
and to
yes.
feel unsafe.
Unsafe in that community.
So you were hesitant about following this call.
Yes, because I know that it needed a lot of healing in my part, facing my own story and like dealing with your own trauma as you also walk alongside other people's trauma in this work. And so for me, it is really a journey of healing more than other people's healing. I think it's
Mhm.
my own healing and God's invitation for me to really heal deeply and experience who he is,
Mhm.
somebody who gives fullness of life. Yeah.
So you'd been at Moody Bible College in the US,
Yes.
comfortable place.
Very comfortable and beautiful place too.
Yes.
Chicago.
Yeah. Okay. And you came back to Metro Manila, and
Yes.
you had a job open for you in
Yes.
arts marketing and
Still.
the theater. You still have it. They're still
Yes.
open. Okay.
They were waiting for me actually.
Okay. So you opted to leave that middle class comfort and the possibility of an easier life to experience, to help other people going through trauma and experience again secondary trauma as you.
Yes, secondary trauma, or we also call it vicarious trauma, because you get to experience other people's the impact of other people's trauma in your own life.
And it's impossible to remain unaffected by that.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. You shared a frightening statistic with me the other day about the percentage of children in the Philippines who have
Yes.
experienced violence.
So they did a 2015 baseline study against the violence against children here in the Philippines, and they said that 8 out of 10 children have experienced physical, emotional, sexual violence in our communities here.
That's a frightening statistic.
Yes. And also last year, the International Justice Mission did a study on the scale of harm of the online sexual exploitation of children here in the Philippines, which, by the way, we are the number one in the world who are exporting materials, graphic, obscene materials of children being exploited online. Yeah.
What are the drivers for that? You spoke about extreme poverty earlier. Is that the primary driver?
Yes, that one. And also, I feel like we don't take children with respect. And because we thought these are just children, this will not harm them or something like that. So I feel like we don't see children the way Jesus would see them.
Okay. Even though it's a very religious society.
Yes, that is also part of the heartbreak I think that I personally have in a society where we are called the largest Catholic or Christian country in Asia. We have about 500,000 children who are impacted by online sexual exploitation.
Wow.
So that's a lot.
Yeah, one is too much, but
But
500,000
500,000,
ones
yeah,
fighting.
that's based out of the IJM scale of harm study last year.
Wow. So you came back to Manila, Metro Manila, and established an organization called Made in Hope.
Made in Hope, yes.
And this was a call from God to step into some difficult areas and serve people, some of the most vulnerable people in Metro Manila. Tell us about what you do.
So what we do in Made in Hope, we actually don't want to call it an organization, but it
Okay.
is a community that comes alongside women survivors of sex trafficking and their children. In the work that we do, we have several programs. One of them is what we call She Works, and work stands for Women of Reliability, Knowledge, and Skills, because that's how we envision the women survivors from a life that is unstable, from a life of exploitation. We want them to see and experience a life that they will really be proud of themselves. So we offer livelihood skills training. We have entrepreneurial training for some of them who are good in small business, entrepreneurial, that kind of skill. And then we also have a spiritual formation focus. So we're committed to introducing the love of Jesus to them through our spiritual formation programs. And then we also have a program called She Leads. So this is an empowerment program for women survivors who have exemplified leadership qualities, and now they are leading the community of survivors with us. In fact, just recently, 4 of our team are women survivors who are leaders now, who are leading the organization with us. So I'm
Wonderful.
really excited and proud of them. So after 14 years, we have seen the fruit of I would say our labor and walking alongside
Changed
them.
lives within that
Yes.
community.
And now they are one of the strongest voice. Like even here in the Philippines, they are invited by the Philippine government as part of the Philippine Survivors Network. And recently, two of them actually were in Thailand at the Asia Region Anti-Trafficking Conference, because they are also part of the Asian Survivors Network.
Wow.
Yeah, so
So
we're
they have agency,
yes.
they have the dignity of
Mhm.
being leaders themselves.
Mhm.
In a shame based culture, that's a
Yes.
huge thing.
Yeah, and also we have a program for children. So
Mhm.
we call it She Cares. CARE stands for Children at Risk Empowerment and Support.
Mhm.
So these are the children of trafficking survivors, because they were saying, if you really want to help us, then help us through helping our children as well. So we have 70 children in our program who are receiving holistic care. And so they're going to school, their physical health, we're monitoring it. So we're happy that we get to see these children grow, breaking the cycle of exploitation and poverty in their
Because
families.
otherwise that they would continue into
Yes.
drug addiction or prostitution.
Yes,
Or,
and that's the story of a lot of our women. That's why we focus on two communities, because if we have noticed the trend that some of them who were, their parents were prostituted, and then they are doing the same thing. Yeah, and some of them, we have women that are cousins, they are their relatives, so they're part of one family, and that's what most of their families are doing.
it's
So
an endless cycle
yes.
unless somebody steps in and offers an alternative.
Yes.
This episode is sponsored by CrossMap. If you're looking for a place that fills your soul and strengthens your faith, then visit crossmap.com, your trusted source for inspiration and life-changing stories from people of faith. Do you have your own story to tell? CrossMap Blogs is a welcoming place to launch your own blog, publish your testimony in Christ, and share stories that glorify God and edify His people. And while you're there, sign up for the CrossMap daily newsletter and get top Christian videos, inspiring devotionals, and stories from other content creators to strengthen your faith, delivered straight to your inbox. Be encouraged, be a part, be blessed. Visit crossmap.com. So I know that you have a strong emphasis on, you've spoken about the dignity of these survivor leaders, these four, but you have a strong emphasis on the dignity of children as well. And
Yes.
you talked earlier about the value of children in the sight of
Yes.
God. And within your emphasis, as part of your emphasis on the dignity that children have, you talk to me about children having a voice.
Yes, I am also a broadcaster and a producer with Far East Broadcasting Company. So we have a weekly radio program for children, but it's not just for children, it's made by children. So I'm have been doing that for the last 12 years, and this is called Okido the 414 Kid Show.
Okay.
Yes. So we are broadcasting on the air with Far East Broadcasting Company through 702 DZAS. That is the radio band. And yeah, we're broadcasting every Saturday with some of these children. Yeah.
I've seen videos of that
Yes.
broadcast. It's really exciting,
Yeah, it's
and some of those
exciting.
children are now taking a lead in producing as well.
Yes, I cannot be much prouder than them, because some of them who's gone through their children, and now they're young adults, and they are writing the script for us. Yeah, so they're actually producing it with us.
What is the content of these?
So these are just the reality of what it means to be a Filipino child. So I remember we had a series on mental health on children, and that was during the pandemic. So this is in partnership too with World Vision here in the Philippines. We are writing stories of children on how they can deal with their own grief or challenges in their mental health, and yeah, different topics about everything, but most importantly, sharing with them the love of God through, we have scripture memory verse every week, and then we have a portion where we ask children your thoughts and opinions about political issues.
Okay.
Yeah, so
I bet you get
it's
interesting answers
yes,
to
it's
that.
really fun.
Yeah,
It's really fun to hear what they think about corruption in the Philippines.
Yeah.
So I have come to love that show. And
Yeah.
what I was really proud of that too is it is all volunteers. Yeah. And even the children, Saturday morning, they will wake up early so that they can record every week.
Travel to the
Yeah,
studio.
and we don't pay them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really an intergenerational ministry.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Can you can you remember any examples of things that they said about the political scene and corruption? It'd be interesting to hear
Yeah.
what children have to say.
Yeah. So most of them would say they should do the right thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So because
Simple as
we will
that.
ask them, we ask them, what are your thoughts about it? They should stop doing that. They should do the right thing.
Interesting. As
Yeah.
simple as that.
As simple as that. And we adults, we're complicating
Yes.
things. Yeah.
Yes.
But that was the answer that I can vividly remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
They should do the right
They
thing.
should do the right thing.
You should stop doing that and do the right thing. That's a really powerful statement. I'm going to write that down. While I write that down, I just want to come
Yes.
back to your calling to this challenging. It's a really challenging
Okay. Yeah.
area of service, isn't it? Building this community.
Yes.
And you chose to go into a really challenging area of service. Can you tell us a little bit more about the price of carrying your cross in that area?
I don't think I will survive the last 14 years if I didn't know that I was called into this. I think it really started with God's call in my life, and also thinking about that my life story is also connected with my calling. For many years, I think until it was only when I was about 27 or 26 years old that I became vocal about my story. For many years, I am shameful
Sure.
about where I
Yeah.
come
Yeah.
from and the background of my
Yeah.
childhood.
Yeah.
Even my other friends in school wouldn't know that as a child I have experienced those things. And even as a professional working in arts marketing and theater, I wouldn't tell them. So it was only when I was about, I think, 27 years old when I began sharing my story.
So that's for me part of the pain of this, that these victims of abuse
Yeah.
experience, that the victims feel shame.
Yes.
It's not their, they shouldn't feel shame. They shouldn't
Yeah.
feel guilt. It's not their fault in any way. How do you help children and women to face that and
Yeah.
recognize that
Yeah.
they do not need to feel shame? They're not responsible for what has
Yeah.
been done to them.
Yeah, because when I reflect on my own journey, I think when somebody have experienced abuse or any kind of exploitation, there are three things that will usually be taken away from you. First is your voice, second is your power, and third is a sense of being connected or belonging to a community. So I want to be a part of a community where I can bring that back to the women survivors that and children that I'm working with. So we want to bring back their voice, listening to them and allowing their voices to be heard from becoming voiceless. We call it voiceless. It's not, I think that's not the right term. They have a voice. Their voice has been silenced for so long. So we have to be able to listen to them and to listen to them deeply and well. And we have to bring back their power. We don't have power to bring them back, but allow them to hold the power, the agency that they can do something and encourage them with their God given gifts and restore the dignity. Actually, they have. And also to foster a safe and thriving community where they can be open to who they are. So it's providing that space where their voices are heard, where they will feel that they belong, a sense of community, and that they are empowered and that they have the power to change the course of their life.
We were speaking earlier about how often these women particularly will not find that safe community in churches, sadly. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So for many years, we have been encouraging our women to go to church because we actually thought we are not a church because institutionally we are not. We are a nonprofit organization.
Mm.
But the reality in some of the churches that we have found ourselves trying to connect with, they are not comfortable in those places. One, because it is difficult for a woman who, for so long working in the streets, to overnight change the way that they dress and sometimes the way that they act or connect with other people. So they feel that they are not really welcomed in the churches. And some of them even are coming from a whole night from the street
Mm.
going to these places, and they feel that when they go to church people are looking at them and they are not welcome,
They
in
don't
those,
fit in.
yeah, in those spaces. And so I feel like there needs to be a way for us as a church, as a community, to welcome them. So I remember there are fellowships that we hold during Fridays or Saturdays where some of them actually are coming and they're still under the influence of drugs. And that's how we welcome them as they are. But as the years go by, as the weeks go by, and you will see them totally different, totally changed person. So sometimes it takes time to journey with
Sure.
with people.
Yeah, it's a long
Yeah,
process.
yeah.
And it's the way of Jesus.
Who is so patient with us. And the patience and the love of Jesus, we need to embody that in wherever ministry we are called to.
How do you reconcile that understanding of the patience and the love of Jesus and the record in the Gospels of Jesus' encounter with people on the margins and struggling people with the reality of these women, for example, not being welcomed in a
In the
church?
church, yeah, it's difficult. It's always a tension too of how do we tell the church people that these are the that you have to read the gospels. You have to read how Jesus deal with the tax collector, eats with the prostitutes, deals with children. And I think that's we have to take that seriously. We do not just read the words of Jesus, but we need to embody the life of Jesus. So when we read the gospels, we read how Jesus acts, how Jesus thinks, and that's who we are, really need to be in this world.
And that's the kind of community that you are building in Made in Hope.
Yes.
Have you seen any church communities begin to hear what you're trying to tell them about coming back to the Jesus of the New Testament?
Yes, now we have partner churches
Okay.
around us who are opening their church. Some of our
Okay.
women survivors actually goes in these churches now. They're opening up, and even their children are part of the Sunday school, part of the children's church. So we're happy that it's opening up, but it
Yeah.
takes time. It
Yeah.
takes time.
Because it's a clash of cultures.
Yes, yeah. In our Filipino culture, we're so conservative
Okay.
talking about these issues, and so it's difficult to talk about this even in the church. So it's a Catholic country. So
Catholic country, shame-based. Yeah.
yes,
Going off the point completely, Michelle, not walking around, I've noticed another thing I've noticed firstly, it's a very religious society. Secondly, I've noticed there seems to be a lot of love of pets. There are these cat grooming shops and so on. Is that a big thing in the Philippines?
this is just recent.
Oh, okay.
It's just recent, and we are actually in a part of town that has a little bit more of the finances to finance those things.
Okay.
But if you go to my part of town,
You wouldn't find that.
you wouldn't find that
Okay.
the dogs are straying around, walking around.
Okay.
The cats are. So I think sometimes it's where you live
Okay.
that you
Yeah,
see
okay.
these
It's a
things.
question of affluence.
Yes.
Okay. And then the more affluent society is, the more difficult it is for the affluent communities to understand the less affluent communities. Yeah. So you've spoken about people having voice because it's a gift of God, people having agency in God-given gifts and dignity,
Yes.
power, people belonging
To a community.
to a community. What are the biggest encouragements that you've seen in the community of Made in Hope?
Now we have women survivors who are so empowered that they go to the communities doing the prevention work of child sexual abuse. So we have those moments, glimpses of how when they are restored to their God given dignity, they are empowered to speak in these spaces of influence. And I'm also encouraged to see that some of our women survivors who have struggled financially, now they are great business women in the
Great.
community.
Okay.
So they have businesses, small businesses, but thriving businesses that they felt dignified because they have it. And we have
Wonderful.
children now who are getting honors in their schools.
Wow.
So those are just glimpses of
Yeah.
the way that we see people now
Wonderful.
it, versus when we met them from the beginning.
Yeah. And talk to us a little bit about that prevention element that you just mentioned.
Yeah, so we have developed materials so that we can prevent online sexual exploitation of children, and we also have a material called Good Touch, Bad Touch. So it's talking about what is a good touch, what is a bad touch, because sometimes all of this starts with child sexual abuse. So we have these materials that our women survivors and our children actually goes to the community, and they are the one facilitating this trainings, this conversation in the community so that we can prevent the exploitation of children.
They do that in families or in
No, in
schools?
schools, in churches, yeah, in faith communities, yeah, just in communities.
And people hear that?
Yes.
Okay.
So they're the ones who's actually doing it to our communities, becoming advocates.
So partly the communities hear it because it's people from the community who are sharing these realities. You also talked to me the other day about an important element of what you're doing being prayer practices.
Yes.
Talk us through that a little bit.
I've realized too in more than a decade of this work that we cannot sustain this kind of work if we are just relying on our own strength, on our own giftings, and our own talent. We need to drink from a deeper well. It's a deep source of God's deep compassion and love for these people. So it is important that we have spiritual practices that will sustain us and a kind of spirituality that will sustain our ministry in the margins. Because I feel like if we are doing it out of saviorism, out of our own anger, out of just whatever we have inside of us that is not coming from a divine source, it is not the powerful work, because actually we become powerful when we acknowledge that we are powerless. Yeah, so it's really always having a time wherein you can center down and you allow the Spirit of God to fill you with His love so that when you go out there, it is the love of God that comes out of you. It's not coming from your own strength.
Because in your own strength, you would fail.
Yes, you always need to go back to a place wherein you are giving from the fullness of love from your heart. You cannot give from an empty cup. So you have to have spiritual or prayer practices, a strong prayer life that will sustain you in this kind of work. So for me, that would be 20 minutes of silence in the morning. That's a prayer practice for me. I go on retreats, solitude retreat or silent retreat that will really help me even to deal with my own personal things as I encounter the trauma of other people or even my own trauma to process that. I believe that we have a divine therapist that can help us. Of course, we have therapists too in our program who
Okay.
helps us a
You have
lot.
professional.
Yes, definitely. But we need to come to the one who knows us deeply to help us.
And you've talked to me about about community mobilization as well as that's another element that helps that builds what you're doing. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, because I think it's important that we are not just working with the women survivors, but we are also influencing our communities, our local governments, our national government. and be a part of policy making, of changes that needed to happen in the community. So for us as an NGO, a non-government organization, we are recognized by the Department of Justice here in the Philippines. So we are in those spaces where we attend dialogues about how we can work together, and then also talking to the local government. Actually, the space where we have now was given to us by the local government of Quezon City because they have seen us working in this field, and so they have given us a space so that we can do our work there. So now we actually have a voice. They listen also to us. We have conversations with them. Just recently, we are hit by, I think, about 5 typhoons in just the last 2 months. And the ones that are impacted by that are poor brothers and sisters here, especially in our communities. 40 of the families of our women survivors are actually submerged in flood waters. And so recently we were talking to the local government about what can they do about that. So it's also becoming advocates, not just about their issue, but holistically how their lives are actually impacted by other factors that affects their state in life.
So you will partner with anybody who will address the well-being and the welfare,
Yes, yeah.
the health
Yeah.
of those you are seeking to serve.
Yeah, because it's an ecosystem. We live in this big ecology that the national issue actually impacts some of the poorest in our community. So we need to consider all those different systems that has an impact in the life of our children, our survivors.
As you're talking in those terms, I'm thinking about root causes of some of this extreme poverty and this climate impact on the poorest and the most disadvantaged. And again, it may be that you come back to the same answer about prayer and so on and the compassion of Christ, but I'm wondering how you persevere and keep going when the root causes don't seem to change, even though you're trying to partner with national government and all sorts of people who might be able to have an impact on some of those root causes.
Yeah. I think that's the importance of lament and the importance of just being honest about our disappointments, because not everything we will get that if we pray today then have it tomorrow. But I always go back to that verse where we are encouraged to not grow weary in doing good, for at the right time, so I always look forward to that right time. Whatever it is. But let us not be weary of doing good. Yeah.
And in the case, for example, of those 4 survivor leaders, you've seen the right time.
Yes, the product of many years of praying, of crying, of toiling, and yes.
So what would you say to anybody who's listening to this, whose circumstances are really extreme and they feel completely hopeless? What would your advice be?
We need to remember that the God who is with us is our Emmanuel. He is with us. So even in our pain, even in our tears, He is the God who is with us. Because I feel like most of us in our Christian evangelical worldview are always triumphalistic in our approach to sharing the gospel. But I think we need to have a theology of God that will sustain us in the hardest places in mission. And that theology is the incarnation of God, who tells us on Christmas time that He is our Emmanuel, God who is with us. And that is a reminder for us to persevere even in those hard moments of our life and ministry.
Because the God who is with us truly understands pain.
Yes, He goes before us. We do not have a high priest that do not understand where we are. That's what Hebrews said. We have a high priest who's been there, so He knows our pain.
And that pain which you experience every day in Metro Manila is a pain that Jesus understands. Yeah. Michelle, thank you so much for being willing to talk to me. Is there anything else you'd like to add as we begin to close?
What would I like to add? I think I just wanted to add, for us to take the words of Jesus seriously, let the children come. Let the children come to me. Do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as this. So it's a call for us to take children seriously, to not just do things for them, but also with them. Because here in the Philippines, we have a national hero that says, the children are the hope of the nation. And we have a national hero who said that. But we also have a hero in Jesus who embodies that. So I want us to embody that.
The children are the hope of the nation.
Yes.
Sheba Tolentino, Made in Hope, thank you very much for being willing to talk to me.
You.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Faith Without Frontiers. I hope you've been refreshed, stimulated, encouraged, and inspired by the conversation, perhaps even challenged. If you enjoyed today's episode, then please subscribe so that you don't miss the next story of faith in the series. And do consider sharing the podcast with friends, colleagues, or members of your church community. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and strengthen you as you serve Him wherever He has placed you.